Well, hello everyone. I'm Jill Bloom, Group Publisher of Building Enclosure, and welcome to our podcast show. It's always an honor to have with me Trent Cotney, partner with Adams and Reese. Trent, thank you so much for joining me.
Jill, thanks for having me.
Well, Trent, there's no doubt you are the leading voice when it comes to a lot of things going on in construction. And this one, no doubt, is going viral very quickly. The FTC just came down with a ruling, 3-2, that bans non-competes. That's huge. That's kind of scary for a lot of people, probably exciting for some, but most importantly, on the contractor side, I guess it doesn't matter if you're a contractor, if you're an architect, if you're a specifier, if you're whatever, distributor, it affects everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Any employer that's out there, it's going to affect you. And, we had an inkling that this might come to fruition. We knew that it was going to be teed up. But, on Tuesday, April 23rd, the Federal Trade Commission voted 3-2 to issue this new rule, basically prohibiting the use of non-compete agreements for most U.S. workers. And, the stats that I saw said there's approximately 30 million workers that are bound in some way by non-competes. Obviously, Jill, there are some states that have already taken steps to outlaw non-competes, but it's still, throughout the land, you still see quite a bunch of them. And especially for C-suite and, key employees, non-competes are a way to kind of ensure that, they're at least going to not go to another competitor. So very interesting ruling. And I think there's obviously a lot more that we'll talk about here and later, I'm sure. So
Yeah, for sure. But it looks like if you're making over 151,000 and you're in the C-suite and you're part of being a policymaker for the company, that does not involve you. But clearly that's not the majority of workers out there.
Yeah, so let's break it down. So the new rule is expected to go into effect in 120 days, right? So we got a little bit of time. And like I mentioned before we got, started here, there's going to be a legal challenge. We'll obviously unpack that in a little bit, but there will be a legal challenge to this, and whether or not that's going to be effective remains to be seen. But as soon as this goes effective 120 days, in 120 days, any new non-compete agreements would be prohibited for all workers. Okay, no new non-competes for any worker. For existing non-competes, most would be unenforceable after that effective date. However, for senior executives, existing non-competes would remain in place. And those are senior executive is defined as someone that is earning more than 164 each year and is holding policy making roles. Okay, it's estimated based on the rulings and things that I saw from the FTC that fewer than 1% of workers are categorized as senior executives. And even if you meet the earning requirement, you may not have the policy making role. So here's an example. Salespeople are highly compensated. They may make a ton of money, beyond the 151, but they may not have policy making roles. And obviously, that term will be better defined, as we start seeing opinions and other things out there. But, if for some reason that senior exec leaves and goes somewhere else, then they wouldn't be subject to a non-compete for a new company. That existing non-compete would still be in place. And it's going to be interesting to see, especially when this is challenged, how that parses out as well.
So Trent, if a non-compete is in place, let's say before this ruling even came down, is it easy to enforce a non-compete?
Yeah, so great question. Non-competes are probably the most litigated issue in employment law. We have a very large employment group here. You met some of our employment attorneys over the years. And I think some have assisted with, doing podcasts and that kind of stuff. The thing that we see is that non-competes are generally narrowly construed, right? In most jurisdictions, you need to have at least three things. You need to have a short duration of time, so usually 2 years or less. A geographic allocation. So if they're only working in, let's say, Orange County, they can't, you can't ban them from working upstate in an area where, you don't do business. And the third thing is the type of job. So let's say they are, a C-suite now, but they want to transition to a marketing role. Okay, I've seen a lot of judges say, well, if I'm construing this narrowly, I don't really see how that's competitive. Now, the one thing that I want our listeners to understand is, let's assume if you're an employer and you're wringing your hands right now, let's assume worst case scenario that non-competes go away, right? That doesn't prevent the whole host of other restrictive covenants that you could potentially add in there. So you can, do not confidentiality provisions, non-solicitation provisions, so they can't solicit your customers or employees. There's a variety of different things that you can do. Obviously, it varies state by state, but there are still prohibitions that you can put in there that would potentially have teeth in the event that you've got issues, right? So here's an example, Jill, right? If let's say I am, an operations manager, right? And I leave one company to go to another company. If I have a non-compete and it's a direct competitor, then clearly I can enforce that non-compete. But let's say I don't have that non-compete. If I have evidence or I have, reasonable suspicion that they're using, proprietary information that they obtained from the company, or they are soliciting my employees or soliciting my customers, then that could potentially form the basis of a claim in and of itself. Obviously, non-competes have more teeth and are scarier, but it's not the end of the day for employers. Now, here's one other thing I want to mention, Jill, and this is what a lot of people haven't talked about, which they need to be talking about. A lot of employers, to get their employees to execute non-competes, they offer them an additional consideration, right? They will offer them, sign this non-compete for $10,000, right? So the question becomes, if the non-compete is no longer enforceable, does the employee have to disgorge that money? I think there's an argument there, right? So there's a lot of these things. Once you start unpacking this, it becomes sort of a labyrinth, a morass that you've got to navigate all these different issues. But clearly, this should be top of mind of every employer out there.
What do you think that employers should put in place that will help limit their exposure to their competitors and some of that proprietary information?
Yeah. So first off, I should say absolutely going to be challenged. One of the key things that I think that this rule is going to be challenged on is some of the same arguments that we've seen asserted against other administrative action. So the doctrine is known as the major questions doctrine. And what that says is that a federal agency, if it wants to solve a significant political or economic problem, it's got to do that with congressional support, right? It can't just come out and start making policy. And if you read a lot of the statements that were made by, for example, the FTC chair, Ms. Khan had made a variety of different statements. It calls into question that. So I think there's a variety of constitutional challenges to this. I'm not a betting man, but I can almost guarantee you that this will be legally challenged, and whether or not it holds up, don't know. Okay, let's assume it does hold up. First thing is, and I get asked this all the time, should you even use a non-compete, right? The best way to keep employees is to keep employees happy.
Well,
right?
for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, no matter what, anytime you think you need to enforce something legally, it's time and money.
Right, exactly. So keep your employees happy, pay them well. You don't have to worry about a non-compete. That being said, like I said, there's a lot of different ways that you can attack this, both from an employee manual standpoint and separate employment agreements that deal with everything from confidentiality, proprietary information to, non-solicitation provisions to other things like that. There are ways where you can disincentivize employees from looking elsewhere legally. Classic example is if you paid for training, if it's drafted the right way and you're in a state that allows it, you can have a provision that allows you to claw back that money, right? Obviously,
Meaning like if I give you this training and if you leave within 6 months, you have to pay me back for the training.
Right, exactly. And, you have to be very careful about all this because, there are minimum wage issues, overtime issues. It is a complicated, not a one size fits all analysis. But there are a variety of ways you can accomplish the same goal and not use a non-compete or similar goal. Non-compete clearly is the hammer. It's the rifle shot, right?
Sure.
And it's the scariest of any restrictive covenant that's out there. So employers, especially if you have a highly compensated employee that you are investing a lot of money in, you need something there, right? It is basically the prenup of employer-employee relationships.
Mhm.
And it is, do you need one for your crew member? No. But you definitely need one. I like having that kind of hammer there, because if you are investing a ton of money, let's say you paid a recruiter fee, you've done all these other things, you want to ensure that there's gonna be some loyalty there, at least within your geographic region.
Well, what I find what's fascinating in this FTC fact sheet that they have that we'll post on with this article as well, Trent, is they're saying that by banning non-competes, the FTC estimates that new businesses will form by 2.7%, creating over 8,500 new businesses. American workers' earnings will increase 400 to 488 billion over the next decade, with workers earnings rising an estimated 524 a year on average.
Mhm.
They say healthcare costs are going to be reduced. Innovation will increase. I mean, where did this ruling come from? I mean, how do they come up with this?
I don't know. Clearly I'm not an economist, and I'm definitely not a politician. But I can tell you, in construction, it's a zero-sum game, right? I mean, it's not going to create new jobs. You're talking about one person moving to another company. So
Right.
again, I'm coming from a common sense standpoint. Maybe there's something I don't know, but I find it hard to believe that this justifications merit this kind of decision. The way that I look at it is that you should be free to contract, within limits in an employment relationship, right? I mean, there should be limits, there should be guardrails, but it's just like any other agreement. If you voluntarily agree to join a position to get paid X, to even get paid a bonus because you're signing that document, then you should be able to do that. Or if you don't want to do that, go somewhere else that doesn't happen, right?
Got it.
So I don't like, personally, I don't like when the government says intervenes with anything contractually. I understand there has to be guardrails with regard to employment, but this has been a long-standing provision. Obviously there are states that are prohibited. They're welcome to continue to do that, but to have a federal national ban on this, that seems to be a lot. So
That's a tough one.
yeah.
Great. Well, any other, again, let's just recap that. Trent, so today, what should be the first thing that all employers need to just make sure that they think about?
They need to watch this closely. They need to watch the litigation that's coming closely and the decisions that are coming out of it. I do think it'll be challenged. I think there's a good basis to overturn it. Okay, but I don't know. Once you put the decision in the judge's hands, you never know how it's going to turn out, right?
Got it.
But I do think that there is a decent basis to challenge it, right?
Right.
If you're an employer, what I would do is, if you have relied on non-competes in the past, obviously it is what it is with regard to your existing, employees. But look at your other restrictive covenants. Look at what else you've got in there as far as non-solicitation, confidentiality. Figure out, is there other ways that you could potentially protect yourself? What happens? Ask yourself, well, what happens if I lose these non-competes?
Yeah.
What can I do to potentially protect myself and proprietary information, other stuff that you might have?
So basically trying to find a sales rep for a manufacturer and I leave and I want to jump ship. Do I have the right? I mean, is there any leverage in this to be like, hey, you can't hold me accountable. There's a ban on the FTC just ruled this.
Yeah, so it's not in effect 120 days, and
Okay.
you can absolutely guarantee that it will be legally challenged,
Right.
prior to the effective date. And what that does to enforcement, whether it's state or not, remains to be seen. But I would not bet the farm. Let me put it this way: if you're an employer or an employee, I wouldn't take drastic action yet. I'd stay tuned, because
Wait 120 days.
yeah, don't start shopping jobs right now if you're under a non-compete. But yeah, this is par for the course of what we've seen here lately. Very employee friendly administrative action. You know, it is. And yeah, it is. You know, we'll probably see more of this. You know, so just stay tuned. That was, make sure you're turning into all the you know, news sources that you guys offer, and check out the latest, because we're going to be updating you as stuff comes out.
Trent, you froze for a second there in the beginning of that statement. So you said that this is what you've seen, what you've been we've seen this happening lately is it's an employee-friendly administration.
Yeah, and it's an employee, definitely union-friendly, employee-friendly administration. So a lot of the agency action that you're seeing mirrors that, right? And here's what a lot of people don't understand, Jill, is that presidents come and go, right? Blue, red, don't care, they come and go. Rank and file remains the same, right? Usually. And it takes a while to start replacing those key provisions, like we saw, you know, FTC, wherever it might be.
Yeah.
So for 4 years in administration, start seeing one ruling after another, you know, and that's typical, right? It takes a while to ramp up. So, you know, there's not necessarily going to be a significant amount of change, even if things change in November.
Sounds great. All right, Trent. Well, as always, thank you so much. If anybody has any questions, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. They can email me, trent.cotney@arlaw.com, or hit me up on social @TrentCotney.
Well, thank you so much, Trent. And again, if anybody has any questions for us, make sure you visit us on any of our websites and sign up for all of our free content, especially our e-news, our e-magazine. Follow us on all our social media channels as well, so you can stay up to date on all the great information we're putting out there, especially the legal insights from the man, Trent Cotney, who always has all the insight. And stay safe and healthy, and we can't wait to talk to you soon. Thanks again, Trent.
Thank you.